expressly telling the Trump administration to effectuate and facilitate.
That's a lie. The Supreme Court did not say effectuate. She's a liar.
It was looking really bad to have this person who had been absconded from America, from the streets of America, in one of their prisons.
You wish he was an American, don't you?
We get 61% of independents agreeing with it, the clear majority. And how about among Democrats? Even there, you get about a third of Democrats agreeing with the idea that we should deport more immigrants who are here illegally.
Democrat Kilmar lovers had a bad day. They flew all the way down to El Salvador and apparently were not able to meet with the guy. Here is what one Democrat senator had to say, and then we'll take a look at why he was not granted access. We saw that a letter came down from James Comer. These Democrats submitted a request to get money to have the American taxpayer fund their little dance parties with MS-13 gangbanger terrorists in El Salvador. Comer said we're not going to do that and responded with a funny remark over on Fox. But here's what happened today. We had this Democrat senator called Maxwell Frost, and shout out to Western Lensman on X for clipping this for us to enjoy today, shared this one saying, "We didn't get in. Oh no."
What do you know? Is there any chance you'll be meeting with Abrego Garcia while you're there?
Well, we're actually about to do a press conference to speak a little bit about this, but we got word at the embassy that our request has been denied by the government here locally. They say it's because we're not here on an official capacity. This is part of the reason why Representative Robert Garcia and I sent a letter to Chairman Comer of the Oversight Committee asking for this to be an official CODEL. But we're not giving up. We're going to continue. We have more meetings scheduled for the rest of the day. But part of this, too, is making sure that we keep the conversation alive. We're building off of the trip of Senator Van Hollen. And, you know, we're not the first members here, and we're not going to be the last.
Okay, so Democrats have found their political nominee for their future. It is Kilmar and more gangbangers. But here is the letter that they got in response. You can see we sent a letter. We asked James Comer for your money so they could go hang out with Kilmar and have some more margaritas like Van Hollen did. They're like, ooh, those look refreshing. I'll take two. They went down there and Comer sent this one in response, April 18th, before they left. They say, all right, dorks, I write in response to your letter on April 15th requesting that I, James Comer, approve from the committee's budget official travel for you both to visit the country of El Salvador to meet with a foreign MS-13 gang member whose wife accused him of crimes and who was strongly suspected of human trafficking. It is absurd that you both displayed active hostility for over 2 years towards the committee's oversight of the Biden border crisis and the consequences of millions of illegal aliens entering the country, yet now you're seeking travel at committee expense to meet with foreign gang members. You may be pleased to know that a Democrat Senator Chris Van Hollen was photographed just yesterday in El Salvador enjoying margaritas garnished with cherry slices with the foreign gang member your letter references. If you also wish to meet with him, you can spend your own money. But I will not approve a single dime of taxpayer funds for use on the excursion you have requested. Your request is denied. Sincerely, your friend James Comer. Enjoy the margaritas in El Salvador. And so they went down anyways. They didn't care. They said, fine, we'll use our own money. They went down. They posted this. They said Monday, April 21st. That's today. They say, hey, Representatives Ansari, Garcia, Maxwell Frost, and Dexter, they went down there. They're going to bring attention to Trump's illegal defiance of the binding and unanimous decision that demands the facilitation and return and due process in the United States. This visit comes after Trump admitted to an error. Well, that person was fired. That was a poison pill, by the way. And that was Erez Ruvani, who got fired. To abide by a federal judge in the order to facilitate his return home. He is home. He had no lawful status in the United States. The trip is not being financed by taxpayer dollars because we're paying for it ourselves. They all put quotes about how they fled tyranny or whatever, which is why they want to bring tyranny to America so they feel at home. But that's what they sent out here. Now, here's what James Comer said in response to denying their funding request.
You also, as chairman, have some duties and responsibilities, and that is signing off on travel for members of Congress who maybe want to go to El Salvador to meet with people who have been deported. What's your take on this? What are you going to do with this?
Well, I had two members of the House Oversight Committee, Garcia from California and Frost from Florida, and they sat there silent during the entire Biden investigation, during the entire investigation of Border Patrol and Mayorkas that we had in the Oversight Committee. If anything, they were obstructive. They weren't concerned. They showed no concern for the lack of our national security or the violation of our southern border security laws. But then this one person that the liberal media picked up on that was deported to El Salvador, they went crazy before it came out that he was was actually an MS-13 gang member, and they wanted me to authorize funding at my committee's expense to send them down to El Salvador and meet with this person for a photo op and to have margaritas and, you know, enjoy the sunny weather.
Cherries.
And I obviously denied their request. We're not going to spend a penny of taxpayer dollars for liberal Democrats to continue their stunts to try to appease the radical left-wing base when the American people spoke loud and clear on Election Day. They want our southern border secured, and they want criminal illegals deported, and that's exactly what Donald Trump's doing.
James Comer explaining, you're not going to go meet with gangbangers on the American taxpayer dollar. You can spend your own money to do it. Now, in the Senate, sounds like they did pay to send Van Hollen, but Congressman Maxine Dexter, she went down. She said our country is in a constitutional crisis, and we're going to explain this. I will not rest until due process is upheld for all. Well, they don't really know what due process means, which is why they say it all the time. You can think of it like other words that they use regularly, like when they say inflation is transitory, right? Just a made up word that means nothing. Sounds good to them. They can use it in their emails and their political campaigns and more. Another one might be, just trust the science, you bigot, and stop challenging Fauci. Whatever they were saying, right? It's meaningless. So the word du jour right now is due process, but it's very clear that Kilmar got a load of due process, and we put together a little FAQ for these thick in the head Democrats about the type of due process that Kilmar has received. But here, for example, is what they say. They say he must have due process, but you need to ask the second question, okay? For what? What kind of due process? What would you like to determine at the other end of this process? They'll say, well, to determine whether he's deportable. Should we even deport him? We already had that decided, okay? October 10th, 2019, Judge David M. Jones issued an order. You can click the link and it will show you the order. In fact, this one came from them, from CASA at wearecasa.org. Here's the order, okay? Application for asylum denied. This is the withholding order. We'll come back on that. And he was found to not have lawful status here. His application for asylum is time barred. He was established past prosecution. So this is the withholding, okay? This is the order of withholding, but it's not that he's lawful status. So due process for this finding has already concluded. He is not lawfully here. He already lost this. He is deportable. That was found. There was a due process proceeding on that. The only thing that found was withholding. Another question. Well, Rob, what if he's not MS-13? He should be MS-13. You have to have a hearing to determine that. We already had that hearing. Kilmar already had a hearing. He lost that one. Different judge. Judge Elizabeth A. Kessler found he was non-bondable, wouldn't let him out because he was a flight risk, and made a finding that there was evidence of MS-13 in the finding, okay? That is due process. That's 2 for 2. Got a lot of due process there. What about this? Can he claim asylum? We need to have a hearing. Is there some other reason to keep him here? No. He already had that hearing. It was the same hearing, okay? It's the same issue. Whether he's deportable. No, he's not. The only reason he was in our country is because of the withholding order, which we're going to deal with in a minute. What about this? He needs due process to ensure he has the right to appeal. He's got to appeal, right? Due process America. He already did that. December 19th, 2019. He did an appeal, and he lost the appeal in front of a whole board of immigration. That's more due process, for crying out loud. What about this? Rob, you have to go and you have to have a hearing to cancel the withholding of removal. Remember I explained the first one up here when the judge said, yeah, we got to get rid of him, can't have asylum, all these things, but we're going to grant him withholding. You need to have another hearing to undo that. No, you do not, okay? The judge who found that was Judge David M. Jones. He's an immigration judge. He exists under the Department of Justice, under Article 2. You know who else exists under Article 2? Oh yeah, Pam Bondi and Kristi Noem. So the judge who granted the withholding of removal, I wrote, is an Article 2 judge, not an Article 3 judge. And the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act by operation of the law cancels this dude's eligibility for withholding, okay? So the executive branch set up a process to provide due process inside Article 2 with immigration judges, and Pam Bondi and President Trump overruled that. And if you want to look at the law that allows that to happen, it's 8 U.S. Code 1231. So he's already gotten the due process on that too by operation of the law. The law allows it to happen. Nobody's due process was violated. You can just read the law. We then see some people will say, well, and I think this is their best argument, but also weak, you need to determine whether the proclamation can even target MS-13 or Tren de Aragua, okay? Can Trump in actuality use the law? And I think the Supreme Court could reverse that, you know, could just declare the Alien Enemies Act unconstitutional or something like that. But that's going to undo a lot of their terrorism law because they've also been codified as terrorists, and more Americans have died from MS-13 as terrorists and Al-Qaeda as terrorists than the Russians, right? So what are alien enemies? I think the court's going to have a hard time doing that, but making that decision. But even if they decided we want to overrule the Alien Enemies Act and call it unconstitutional or whatever, because they've done that with, or they've repudiated Korematsu and the other cases that FDR relied on to invoke the Alien Enemies Act to intern the Japanese citizens, by the way. They've repudiated Korematsu, which was that case, but they still have the Ludecky case, which says in Ludecky, when the president is making determinations under the Alien Enemies Act, they're subject to extremely limited judicial review. It's not for the courts to decide whether Tren de Aragua is an alien enemy who's terrorizing America or not. That's for the president to decide, because that's the branch that is accountable to the people. So if you want due process on that, you got it, okay? Trump can make that determination. That's why he got elected. What about this? To determine, Rob, he needs a hearing to determine whether El Salvador is safe. That's a red herring, okay? That's not our problem, whether El Salvador is safe. That's their country and he's a citizen over there. The withholding of removal protections that stopped us from sending him to El Salvador, first of all, those conditions are no longer present down there because of Nayib Bukele, who's done a nice job cleaning things up, but he's a now designated foreign terrorist and needs to go. So the withholding takes care of good people who are not terrorists. We say, oh, you're a good person. We're not going to send you back to El Salvador to get in war with somebody or get killed because you're a political person. So we'll keep you here. But terrorists and other people who are a national security threat, we don't give them the protections of withholding. So by operation of the law, 8 U.S. Code 1231, it again explains why that withholding is no longer valid, okay? It has been removed. By operation of the law, Pam Bondi, Homeland Security, and the president are overriding. You can think of the president and Pam Bondi like as the Supreme Court of Article 2. So all of these immigration judges under Article 2 are overruled now, and due process was provided for those things because they have been found in other legal proceedings to have been adjudicated MS-13, which is why he was non-bondable. So this dude got more due process than most people get in their whole lives. And I also wrote, well, how about this? Well, he needs due process to challenge his detention in habeas in Texas. And I would say, you're right, he does. So in spite of all of this, okay, he's got all of this due process, lots of it. He also has the due process rights to file a habeas petition. So anytime that they come out and they say, we want due process, he got all of it. They want him to get more due process than everybody else. They want him to be above the law. And they're trying to ensnare and confuse people into thinking that all of the illegal aliens are entitled to Article 3 protections, which they are under habeas if they want to file that way, but as a matter of right. They want due process to mean not this. This dude has seen multiple judges, immigration boards, and this is just scratching the surface. I mean, he's had other interactions with law enforcement, but this is the due process that he got provided. The due process naysayers overlook all of this, right? He's got plenty of due process. He was adjudicated accordingly, and now hopefully that can hit them in the brain and so they can understand how this works. But here's what she said.
I flew here last night with 3 of my colleagues to demand that Kilmar Abrego Garcia be released. He is being held in violation of a Supreme Court order expressly telling the Trump administration to effectuate and facilitate.
That's a lie. The Supreme Court did not say effectuate. She's a liar. You can go read it. It did not say effectuate. It said facilitate. And they did. The dude was out hanging out with senators. If he wants to come back to America, he can come back to America, I guess. I don't know what El Salvador's doing with him. We'll pick him up. We'll deport him again. She's a liar on that. They did not say effectuate. Lie, lie, lie. So, all right, that's her. We don't need to listen to liars here, but I guess we'll continue to listen to some more. Here is Chris Van Hollen, who said an illegal immigrant gang member is, he almost called him an American. Listen to this.
I think at some point, the president of El Salvador realized it was looking really bad to have this person who'd been absconded from America, from the streets of America, in one of their prisons.
You wish he was an American, don't you? Because he's your, I guess, favored constituency based upon all the efforts that you put into going out there and partying with him in Margaritaville. But here was another conversation. I mean, this dude travels all the way down there. He doesn't even ask him about his tats or his gang membership.
President Trump says that some of Abrego Garcia's tattoos signify that he's a member of MS-13. In 2019, police alleged a confidential informant claimed that Abrego Garcia was an active MS-13 member. His wife and his attorney deny that, of course. Can you say with absolute certainty that he is not, nor has he ever been a member of the MS-13 gang? And did you ask him point blank?
Well, Dana, what Donald Trump is trying to do here is change the subject. The subject at hand is that he and his administration are defying a court order to give Abrego Garcia his due process rights. They are trying to litigate on social media what they should be doing.
Okay, he got all his due process rights. We just went through the whole list. What else did they want, honestly? I think I answered every permutation. What else do they want? They want a hearing on something else? I think they want more hearings. They want him to have another shot at it. He can file habeas, or could have filed habeas, but he was removable. He got plenty of due process and went back to his home country.
In the courts. They need to put up or shut up in the courts. Let me tell you, I decided to write this down so I could be absolutely accurate as to what Federal District Court Judge Zinnes said about these allegations by the Trump administration.
Okay, nobody even cares about her. She didn't even understand the basic facts before she issued her order. We've already read through that. And she got stayed by the Supreme Court. So her decision that she declared to be a victory, Trump declared to be a victory as well. And Kilmar is afuera. So, all right, that's from Van Hollen. We also saw Senator John Kennedy come out and respond to some of this. Here's what he said.
Well, Chris is my friend, and I respect him, and he's certainly entitled to his opinion, but in my judgment, he is utterly and gloriously wrong.
True.
I mean, most of this gauzy rhetoric is just rage bait. Unless you're next level obtuse, you know that Mr. Garcia is never coming back to the United States, ever. And that's not because of President Trump. That's because of Mr. President Bukele. He said up front in the Oval Office that he was not going to return Mr. Garcia. No federal judge, even Jay Wilkinson, has authority over a sovereign country. Besides that, it should not go unnoticed that Mr. Bukele is much closer to President Xi in China than he is to President Trump. Xi is spending billions of dollars to build infrastructure in El Salvador, and I wouldn't be surprised if they've discussed this case. The final point I would make, whether you agree with it or not, is Bukele hates MS-13. And
why would you disagree with that?
Garcia allegedly is a member of MS-13.
All right, so I don't really know what that was about, but President Ukulele, I guess, he's working with China, according to Senator Kennedy. Here's what Trump said. You know, radical lunatic Democrats and their comrades in the fake news media are falsely making Kilmar Armando, wife-beater Abrego Garcia, out to be a very sweet and innocent person, which is a total, blatant, and dangerous lie. Garcia has been found by 2 separate courts to be a member of the violent killer gang MS-13, was in our country illegally, and is under a deportation order. It is despicable and un-American for liberals and the mainstream media to hate our country so much and be obsessed with protecting criminals instead of working to keep our borders, streets, and families safe. Those lying to the American people on behalf of violent criminals have to be held responsible by the agencies and the courts. Make America great again, from the president. And here, according to Bill Malugin, are more of the people who have been detained. For a senior Trump admin official, these are some of the suspected Venezuelan Tren de Aragua gangbangers detained in Texas that they were planning to deport before SCOTUS stepped in and blocked it. All of them have significant convictions or charges. Here's what we got. Henry Jose Romero, a citizen of Venezuela, multiple pending criminal charges: assault, crimes against a person, unlawful possession of a weapon. Here's some of the tats and the guns. He looks like probably a barber, hairstylist, or somebody who does makeup in California, probably. Here's one. You can see this other dude, Christian Andres, a citizen of Venezuela, criminal charges for larceny and dangerous drugs, right? A bunch of others, all being rounded up. Here is more from Caroline Levitt. She was also out this morning explaining this dude is not coming back to America.
The president swore to the American public he was going to deport illegal criminals, and especially those who have been involved in violent gangs like MS-13 that have terrorized American communities. And so to the Democrat Party, who thinks that they are going to bring this foreign terrorist back to the United States of America to live a peaceful and happy life, that is never going to happen. Not only is this an MS-13 gang member, but he is also an illegal alien who broke our nation's laws to come here. And not only is it a slap in the face to the American citizens whose lives who have been put in danger, or in many cases lost at the hands of these illegal alien criminal gang members, but it's also a slap in the face to the millions of legal immigrants who came to our country the right way, waited their turn, and paid their dues. We have a legal immigration system for a reason. The president is going to continue to uphold that.
And the Democrats will continue to fight for the illegals as opposed to everybody else. Here was Senator Eric Schmidt saying, really strange that the Democrats are making this their political golden goose.
I can't believe that these Democrats are lining up to go down to a foreign country to visit a guy who was here illegally, a criminal, an MS-13 member who beat his wife. He can't be more plain than that. That's who this is. So I think all along, Martha, they were looking for some example of something President Trump would do that was so bad that they could rally behind. I can't believe that they're that stupid that this is the guy. This is the poster child now for their movement.
It is. It might be their Democrat presidential nominee. He might run for governor somewhere. And this is something that it turns out it's AI. I know it was a little hard to make that determination. When I first saw this, I thought, well, yeah, I mean, this is what he looks like when you come back from El Salvador and you hang out with gangbangers. I don't know if they accepted him into the gang or not, but it's not actually real. It's actually just AI. Also came in from CNN. Now, while the Democrats are tatting their faces up with teardrops and skulls, we also see that the American people are supportive of getting our country back on track, securing our borders, getting rid of the illegals, and saving America. Here's what the polls say.
Interesting. What about the White House policy of deporting immigrants that are here illegally?
Yeah, okay, so let's sort of dive sort of a little bit more into the specifics, right? So this is a great question. Deport all undocumented immigrants. That is voters favoring a government effort to deport all 11 million. Look at where we are now in 2025.
Yeah.
56%, the majority of voters agree with this policy, support it, just 43% opposed. That is a massive rise from where we were in 2016 when, of course, Donald Trump was running for the Republican nomination the first time around when it was just 38%. The American public is much more so on Donald Trump's side now than back when he was running the first time around. Now, of course, this is the public at large, right? Let's dive a little bit more into the crosstabs, and this should give you a very interesting look at where the public is, all right? Deport more immigrants here illegally. Well, not much of a surprise, Jake. 90% of Republicans agree with that. But look in the middle of the electorate. Look here. We get 61% of independents agreeing with it, the clear majority. And how about among Democrats? Even there, you get about a third of Democrats agreeing with the idea that we should deport more immigrants who are here illegally. So, yes, there is some specific issue polling which might not necessarily look great for Donald Trump, but when you look specifically at immigration and you dive into the crosstabs and you look at Democrats, independents, and Republicans, it's not much of a surprise that at this particular point in time, it is slight, but still the plurality of Americans give Donald Trump the thumbs up on immigration, which is very much unlike what we see with his policies at large and certainly on the economy, Jake.
And look at that number with independents, because that's really important. That's how you win an election.
You got that right.
Got that right. And that number of Democrats, it's much higher. They just can't admit it. There's a bunch of them going, I don't want any gangbangers in here. You want Kilmar in your neighborhood? No, I don't want Kilmar in my neighborhood. But they would never admit that. They have to say, no, we love due process. How dare you? Do you have any idea what that word means? Not really, but I hate Trump. Okay, have a nice life.